This is The World This Weekend. Hello, I'm Stephanie Skenderis. Coming up, funerals are held for the Israeli hostages mistakenly shot by the IDF as the Israeli government faces more pressure to negotiate a ceasefire with Hamas.
At the end of the day, what we need is for the Israeli government to put an offer on the table.
Also on the program, Ottawa's Jewish community fears violence after the RCMP charge a minor with plotting to attack Jews.
Anti-Semitism has skyrocketed since October 7th, and I've been saying it over and over again. If things aren't going to get better, they're going to get worse, and here they got worse.
And a town in Finland claims it's Santa's summer home, but its expected tourism boon isn't quite going to plan.
Suddenly it was the biggest hit, and everyone wanted to come to travel in the darkest and coldest time of the year. Everything else was kind of forgotten.
That's later, but first. In northern Gaza, Israeli forces give a tour of a large underground tunnel, which they say is 4 kilometers long and large enough for vehicles to pass through. The IDF says a massive tunnel system under Gaza is the biggest challenge to its goal of eradicating Hamas.
This is Hamas, this is why we have to defeat Hamas. And it takes time, because when we need to demolish this kind of tunnels and reveal and demolish, it takes time.
Outside of Gaza, families of hostages mistakenly killed by Israeli forces have gathered to mourn their loved ones. Funerals have been held for 2 of the 3 victims. It comes as thousands rallied in Tel Aviv, demanding another pause in fighting in the hopes more hostages will be freed. And as the U.S. and other allies ramp up pressure on Israel to scale back its war effort. Katie Simpson takes us through the day's events from Washington.
Family and friends gathered around the casket of 26-year-old Alon Shamriz. Prayers and songs unable to mask the piercing sounds of their grief. Shamriz was one of 3 hostages held captive in Gaza, accidentally killed by Israeli forces. That's not what we fought for, his mother says. My child, you were strong, determined, smart. You survived 70 days in hell. We will continue to live for you. The Israeli military says Shamriz and 2 other men, Samer al-Talka and Yotam Haim, were shirtless and waving a white flag when they were mistakenly identified as threats. The killings adding to the intensity of protests in Tel Aviv.
I've never trusted this government, and now it's even worse.
Some of the thousands of demonstrators called for a new pause in fighting in the hopes of helping with hostage negotiations. Ruby Chen's 19-year-old son went missing while he was serving with the Israeli Defense Forces.
At the end of the day, what we need is for the Israeli government to put an offer on the table.
The Israeli government is also facing a new sense of pressure from its allies to do more to prevent civilian casualties in Gaza as it tries to destroy Hamas. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin touched down in Bahrain ahead of his planned visit to Israel. He'll urge Israeli leaders to wind down their air and ground operations. It comes as the foreign ministers of Germany and the UK join Canada in calling for a sustainable ceasefire. In an op-ed, the ministers said Israel has the right to defend itself, but that it must abide by international humanitarian law. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says nearly 20,000 people have been killed.
Ultimately, the target of operation is Hamas and not Gaza's civilians.
Mark Regev, a senior advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, says advice from close allies, especially the Americans, is always considered. Though Netanyahu met with his cabinet Sunday and vowed to push ahead to achieve Israel's objectives. The will of the fallen is what guides us, he says. We will fight to the end. Explosions continued in Gaza through the weekend, with huge plumes of smoke from Israeli airstrikes filling the sky. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
I feel very good now, yeah. I'm back to the normal. I'm back to my house and my kids, everybody happy when I come back to Canada.
That's Akram Al-Sabag speaking on Rosemary Barton Live about his return to Canada from Gaza last month. The 73-year-old was one of hundreds of Canadians stuck in Gaza after the Israel-Hamas war broke out. He traveled from the north to the Rafah border crossing, where he had to wait 2 days to cross into Egypt. Al-Sabag recounted part of his journey, where he traveled 5 kilometers on foot.
The soldier, the Jewish soldier, in a lift in my side, you have to put your hand up with the ID and just walking. If you drop anything from your hand in the ground, you can't take it back. You have to leave it and still walking.
Global Affairs Canada says there are around 200 Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and family members who are still trying to leave Gaza. RCMP say a youth charged yesterday with terror-related offences was allegedly involved in a plot against Ottawa's Jewish community. The news comes as officials in the city say that both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia continue to rise, influenced, experts say, by the war in the Middle East. We get more on this story from JP Tasker.
The tension, the fear among Jewish residents is very high.
The RCMP have stopped what could have been a catastrophic attack on the Jewish community. The city's mayor, Mark Sutcliffe, is promising to double down on protective measures.
We've been increasing patrols around synagogues and other Jewish institutions.
That's a welcome development. Community leaders are expecting more violence. Edon Sher is a rabbi at one of Ottawa's synagogues.
Anti-Semitism has skyrocketed since October 7th, and I've been saying it over and over again. If things aren't going to get better, they're going to get worse, and here they got worse.
Little is known about the terror suspect. The person is a minor and therefore shielded by a publication ban. The allegation is that they instructed someone to carry out an attack with an explosive device. The Mounties are expressing concern about an uptick in youth radicalization, saying in a statement, there's a concerning trend of violent extremism and terrorist use of the internet. Since June 2023, the RCMP has arrested 5 young persons on terrorism-related offenses, the police say.
If the whole Israeli-Hamas conflict hadn't happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Lauren Dawson is a professor emeritus at the University of Waterloo and a terrorism expert. He says parents should be on high alert given world events.
This is becoming far more pronounced all over the world.
Social media is driving some teenagers into the arms of extremists.
The key factor in radicalization is being mobilized into a network. You meet other people who share your point of view, who confirm it, who urge you on to do even more, get involved more in the ideas, to solidify your views. Legitimate it. Wow, look, I'm not alone.
Ottawa's Muslim community is on edge.
Whenever there is a threat against anyone, including our Jewish neighbors, that is deeply concerning to all of us.
Imam Sikander Hashmi says the Israel-Gaza conflict has stirred up anger and frustration.
Clearly, these types of horrific tragedies and horrific instances of war and pain and grief can certainly be used to try to radicalize young people. That's flooding their social media streams. We're not in a good place right now.
There's been a spike in hate crimes across the country. Hundreds of anti-Jewish and Islamophobic incidents have been reported to police since the October 7th attack. The federal government has chipped in some $5 million to bolster security at religious and cultural sites. But community leaders say they need a lot more than that to keep people safe. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Since the war started between Israel and Hamas, Israel has also been trading fire with Hezbollah along its northern border with Lebanon. And fears remain that if the hostilities between Israel and the Iran-backed militia don't end soon, it could turn into a second front. Rebecca Collard explains how Hezbollah went from a small militia to a powerful political force in Lebanon.
In the mountains of South Lebanon, Hezbollah fighters ski with AK-47s and shoot from the back of ski-doos. The sleekly produced video released last year is visual evidence of Hezbollah's transformation from a shadowy guerrilla group into a powerful non-state military force. Hezbollah, which means Party of God, was established in 1982 to fight Israel's invasion and later occupation of South Lebanon, with the help of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. That same year, Hiam Harb gave birth to her first child in a displacement shelter in Beirut. Just 22 years old, she had fled Israel's invasion, but the bombing of Beirut intensified, and Harb went back to her home in the south. There, she saw Hezbollah's early days. She describes how Hezbollah attacked Israeli soldiers from what she calls under the table. Then Hezbollah had just a few hundred fighters and simple weapons. In 1985, Hezbollah released its first manifesto, promising to push Western forces out of Lebanon, end the colonial presence, and what it calls the Zionist occupation of Palestine. Lebanon was still deep in its civil war. In 1989, that war ended and Lebanon's militias were disarmed. But South Lebanon was still occupied, and Hezbollah, the resistance, was allowed to keep its weapons.
In 92, they entered parliament after a huge existential dilemma. Should we be in the system or outside the system?
Bashir Sadeh is a lecturer at the University of Stirling.
That moved it from being a guerrilla underground militant operation to becoming a fully fledged political party with an armed wing.
In 2000, Israeli troops left Lebanon. Harb describes being able to visit villages she hadn't seen in almost 2 decades, and the end of the bombings and raids she'd become so used to, or at least she thought. In 2006, Hezbollah captured Israeli soldiers, setting off a month-long war that destroyed swaths of South Lebanon, including Harb's house. Hezbollah helped her rebuild. By then, her son had joined the group. I support the resistance, and I supported my son to join the resistance, she says. While many countries, including Canada, designate Hezbollah as a terrorist group, Harb calls them her protectors. And there's another side of Hezbollah that fosters loyalty to the group. In a Beirut supermarket, portraits of Hezbollah leaders hang on the wall. The shelves are stocked with staples, many imported from Hezbollah's allies in Iran and Syria. Like thousands of others, Harb has a card that gives her access to the discounted supermarket and also medications. Hezbollah even helped with her cancer treatment. But not everyone in Lebanon supports Hezbollah, and calls have grown for it to disarm. Still, Bashir Sadeh says,
Hezbollah is here to stay. It is deeply, organically linked to the Lebanese population. The resistance idea is here to stay. Way after anything happens in this war.
Past military conflicts with Israel have only bolstered support for the Party of God, and decades of war in the region have shown military might is rarely able to conquer ideologies of resistance. Rebecca Collard for CBC News, Beirut.
The trial begins in Hong Kong tomorrow for Jimmy Lai, a leading pro-democracy campaigner and media tycoon. Lai was the founder of the now-closed Apple Daily newspaper and is one of the most prominent critics of China's Communist Party leadership. He's already serving a 5-year sentence after being convicted for fraud. Now, under sweeping national security laws imposed by China, Lai faces possible life imprisonment on charges he colluded with foreign forces. His son, Sebastian Lai, says the verdict has already been decided.
It's a trial with 3 government-appointed judges, no jury, and the security minister recently boasted of a 100% conviction rate. So an absolute champ.
Earlier this week, both houses of Parliament in Ottawa adopted a motion calling for Jimmy Lai's immediate release. Well, it's a hidden problem that's on the rise: missing seniors. Police forces in Quebec, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are among those that have seen an increase this year in missing people over the age of 60. And as Sarah Levitt reports, experts say it appears to correspond with the rise of a debilitating illness, dementia.
We don't know where he is.
Standing alongside family and friends in Winnipeg, Doug Moberg makes an impassioned plea for help. His 81-year-old brother, Earl Moberg, has been missing since Tuesday.
With dementia, he can go 2 blocks now and doesn't know where he is. The last 2 days have been very stressful for me and my family.
The Moberg family isn't alone in their worry. As Canada's senior population grows, more and more people are dealing with dementia. According to the Public Health Agency of Canada, 1 in 4 people over the age of 85 have been diagnosed with the illness. Police in Montreal, Winnipeg, and Saskatoon have all seen an increase in reports of missing people over 60. And while those numbers are up, advocates say it's likely just the tip of the iceberg of how many seniors go missing.
My father, he lived with Alzheimer's.
For Sam, no, it's personal. 10 years ago, No's father, Shin, went out for a walk near his home in Coquitlam, British Columbia, and didn't return.
There was a massive search effort. We had a our community go out and search for him, but we have no idea about his whereabouts. There's no closure even to this day.
No, turn that pain into action. He's behind the citizen-led group BC Silver Alerts, calling for a public notification system that alerts people to missing seniors in the area. Some places like Manitoba have implemented it, but researchers say even more can be done.
We have to find a way to study this phenomenon in order to improve response and prevention.
Antonio McGill-Cruz is an associate professor at University of Alberta's Faculty of Rehabilitation Medicine. He says police do an amazing job trying to find lost seniors, but
it's a lot of effort, a lot of resources, a lot of coordinations that happens to find a person with dementia.
Howard Bergman agrees. He's a professor of geriatric medicine at McGill University.
We need to put a lot more emphasis on preventing it from happening rather than reacting when it happens.
But when it does, he says, we should not be over-relying on police.
We need to get better at connecting the medical system, primary care, the social service system, and also with the judicial system and the police in order to make sure that we can coordinate and react better when this happens.
As the population ages, he says, the problem will get worse, and the time for action is now. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
AI-generated deep fakes are becoming a disturbingly common problem. Doctored photos, usually of women and girls, manipulated onto naked bodies. Students at multiple schools in the U.S. have had their privacy shattered when fake nude photos of them appeared online. And this week, it happened in Canada to several girls at a Winnipeg school. These fake images are increasingly easy to create. As Philip Lee Shannock reports, experts say the laws need to catch up.
This is hurtful because things don't disappear off the web.
Noni Kopczewski's son attends College Belleville High School in Winnipeg. She got a letter this week from the school saying that some real photos of female students had been used to create fake naked pictures.
I guess I'm very naive to think that it would be in our area, the artificial intelligence and the doctoring.
A similar incident happened at a Florida high school this week. 2 boys at Pinecrest Cove Preparatory Academy in Miami, accused of making deep-fake naked images, were suspended for 10 days. This student says that's not enough.
I looked them in the face and they acted like they didn't do anything. It made me feel violated. It made me feel unsafe.
Ritesh Kotak is a Toronto-based cyber and tech analyst. He says there's been an explosion in the number of apps and platforms that use artificial intelligence to generate these images.
All you need is just somebody's face and the AI does all the work for you.
He says it's only becoming worse as access to this technology is more readily available. One report by the Associated Press says this year alone, more than 143,000 new deepfake videos were posted online. That's more than every other year combined.
It's clear that the law just hasn't really caught up to the technology.
So it's not going to stop unless people get punished for it.
Mara Grossman teaches computer science at the University of Waterloo. She's also a legal expert.
It's extremely challenging to stop people from using a technology that's pretty much free.
She says several U.S. states have tried to combat the problem. Texas, Minnesota, and New York passed legislation this year criminalizing non-consensual deepfake porn, while New York, California, and Illinois allow victims to sue for damages.
The harder challenge is whether there is a law to prosecute them.
It can still be considered child pornography.
Here in Canada, Stephen Sawyer, director of the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, says in the case in Winnipeg, sharing the fake images may violate the criminal code.
It is a sexual image of someone under the age of 18, and that's considered child sexual abuse material or child pornography under the legislation.
But with deepfakes becoming an international problem and jurisdiction an issue, legislation alone won't be the only solution. Philip Lee Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
As you'll understand from Philip's story, the ability for AI to easily generate fake photos has created a lot of anxiety. But one activist in Argentina hopes to use AI's power for healing. He's using the technology to find people who were stolen as children from political dissidents decades ago. Mandy Sham has the story, which we first brought you in October.
It's a person who doesn't go anywhere, who isn't anywhere.
In other words, a shadow of a person, denied justice and the right to be remembered. 47-year-old Santiago Barros is talking about the desaparecidos, people who didn't just go missing, but were disappeared during the period known as Argentina's Dirty War.
We have a desaparecido in our family, so it's something that I grew up with.
That absence is felt across Argentina, a wound that has scarred nearly every household and refuses to heal.
Dos desaparecidos.
Tengo mis 3 hijos desaparecidos.
Between the 70s and 80s, an estimated 30,000 people were kidnapped or killed. Hundreds of their children were stolen and raised in families linked to the dictatorship. When Barros came across the AI program called Midjourney, he realized he could merge images to generate faces of those children as they might look today.
I combine those pictures, mother and father, and create a new image.
The photos are published almost daily to an Instagram account called Hay Abuelas. It's a nod to decades-long efforts led by the abuelas or grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo.
Hemos tomado una decisión.
A group that has successfully identified nearly 140 stolen children. Barros says his project is about public awareness and aims to spark the conscience of anyone with doubts about their ancestry. At least 10 people have contacted him with hopes of generating images of their missing family members.
There's a great quote that technology is neither good nor bad, neither is it neutral. It does what we make it do. AI is no different.
Richard Lachman is an associate professor of digital media at Toronto Metropolitan University. He says AI programs like Midjourney aren't accurate, and they tend to reflect the biases of the society they're built in. That means, for example, the photos could skew toward European facial characteristics. Still, Lachman says projects like Hay Abuelas speak to the potential of AI.
This is something that is getting awareness, is getting us to pay attention. And that's not nothing. That is something that's incredibly important to get people to remember.
It may be artistic in nature for now, but Barros wants to use Hay Abuelas to send a message to young people who have only ever known democracy.
We need to teach them what happened and to remember what happened.
He says it's an exercise in memory and justice for the thousands who are missing and dead, but he hopes never forgotten. Mandy Sham, CBC News, Toronto.
Whether AI is being used for good or not, many people are calling for governments to step in with regulations. Some governments already have those in place. Others are studying the issue. But putting guardrails on AI isn't so easy. I spoke about that with AI researcher and author Meredith Broussard. Here's some of what she said.
It's very difficult to make rules about AI in the abstract everywhere throughout time. I mean, you start doing that and you just you can't get anywhere. So what helps is if you tie the AI to a particular context, right? So it's not about all AI everywhere throughout time, but it's about a particular kind of AI, like facial recognition, used in a particular context, like policing, right? So when you think about, okay, well, how am I going to make rules about facial recognition used in policing on real-time video surveillance feeds? It's a lot easier than if you try and think about AI in the abstract, in every country, in every language, in every culture, in the entire world.
Meredith Broussard is a data journalism professor at the Arthur L. Carter Journalism Institute at New York University, and she's the author of the book More Than a Glitch, Confronting Race, Gender, and Ability Bias in Tech. You can hear my full interview with her next Sunday, December 24th, on a special edition of The World This Weekend, focusing on the promise and the peril of artificial intelligence. You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Every child knows that Santa Claus lives in the North Pole. then maybe that's in Canada. But say that to the Finns, and they'll call you a liar. Since the 1980s, the small city of Rovaniemi has claimed to be the official hometown of Santa Claus. And it's hoping that marketing will attract tourists, not just at Christmas, but all year round. Freelance reporter John Last tells us how that's going.
Travel north from Rovaniemi's bustling downtown, and you can't miss it. The palatial halls of Santa's village. There are gift shops, restaurants, and boutique hotels, and Christmas music playing year-round. And, of course, there's Santa Claus himself. You can brainstorm toy ideas in his main office, or pal around with his famous reindeer. You can even book a sleigh pulled by some of his 111 dogs, all Siberian Huskies, of course. Ask Visit Rovaniemi, the local tourist board, and this is where Santa lives year-round. For decades, the town has marketed itself as the official hometown of Santa Claus. That's filled the stockings and lined the pockets of the town's tourism operators. But living in Santa's backyard has its downsides too. Sanna Karkkanen is the CEO of Visit Rovaniemi. She says the town was once better known for its long summer days. But when Santa came to town, everything changed.
Suddenly it was the biggest hit and everyone wanted to come to travel in the darkest and coldest time of the year. Everything else was kind of forgotten.
Today, more than 500,000 tourists visit Rovaniemi over Christmas, but the rest of the year, its hotels sit empty. Theo Turner runs Wild About Lapland, a tour company in town.
We want to keep our workers on. We want to give them a year-round job.
Turner says he serves about 30,000 clients in winter and just 500 in summer for now. That means he can only afford 3 year-round positions from a staff of more than 40 experienced guides. But Turner knows selling Santa's home as a summer destination won't be easy.
I know lots of people want to come here in the summer, but airlines aren't supporting it.
Direct flights to Rovaniemi doubled this year, but airlines will only run those routes in the winter when they know demand is highest. Maybe they've simply forgotten why Santa settled here in the first place. Summers here sure are nicer than at the actual North Pole. There's broad lakes, lush forests, and the warm midnight sun.
Life in Lapland in the summer is in full bloom.
And of course, there's still Santa, too. This is his hometown, after all. Who knows, maybe even Santa gets jollier in the summertime. As Karkkanen would say, there's only one way to find out. For CBC News, I'm John Last, Rovaniemi, Finland.
Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away.
That's Alanis Morissette covering Wham's Last Christmas from her new Christmas album. If the sound of that song alarmed you, let us reassure you. Covers don't count. And if that's confused you, let us explain Whamageddon.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
Whamageddon started 18 years ago when a group of friends in Denmark realized that every December they heard a lot of Last Christmas. If you've ever worked any retail, you know that's true. So the friends decided to make a game of avoiding the original song for as much of December as possible. If you lose, you've been whammed and you're banished to Whamhalla. If you win, nothing much happens. It's supposed to be fun and lighthearted, and you're not supposed to trick anyone into hearing Last Christmas. Somebody should have told that to British DJ Matt Facer, who DJs for the Northampton Town Football Club. He pulled a little stunt recently at halftime and explained himself to the BBC.
I gave it a spin, thinking it'd be quite funny to wipe out 7,500 people that couldn't avoid it. But clearly it isn't funny.
Those who'd been whammed let DJ Matty know just how they felt online.
Apparently that was quite tame compared to what was being said at the stadium, so I officially apologised to everybody whose Christmas I've ruined. Well, I never knew people took it so seriously, but clearly they do. So I've had my knuckles wrapped.
Actually, the fathers of Whamageddon say no one takes it more seriously than the Brits. They also say the game just keeps growing. On TikTok, Whamageddon's been tagged more than 11 million times, with people sharing their strategies and their failures.
I made it to December 1st before being sent to Wamhala. December 1st. December 1st.
It's kind of impossible, and I lost this morning because a friend sent me a TikTok with that song.
I don't want to make a big speech, but yes, I was whammed.
If you're playing Whamageddon and you've made it this far, we won't spoil it for you. But we are going to play Last Christmas. So if you don't want to hear it, I'm going to say something you'll never hear me say again. Turn down the volume. And if you're still with us, here's Wham's Last Christmas on The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Thanks for listening.